The wind screamed across the frozen wasteland like a wounded beast. Minho pulled his thermal suit tighter around his body, but the cold still found ways to creep inside. He had been walking for 3 hours now, collecting ice samples from the northern sector of Viralis. This was his job. This was what he did every day on this frozen planet at the edge of known space. Minho was a xenobiologist. That meant he studied alien life forms. The Human Research Station had sent him here 2 years ago to learn about the creatures that lived on Viralis. Most days, his work was boring. He would collect samples, run tests, and send reports back to Earth. Nothing exciting ever happened. But today was different. Through the blowing snow, Minho saw something that made him stop. There were shapes on the ground ahead, dark spots against the white ice. He squinted through his helmet visor, trying to see better. The shapes were not moving. Maybe they were rocks? No, Minho had mapped this area before. There were no rocks here. He walked closer, fighting against the wind. His boots crunched on the frozen ground. The temperature display on his suit showed -60 degrees, deadly cold for most living things. As he got nearer, Minho's heart began to beat faster. Those were not rocks. They were bodies. Small bodies covered in white scales that blended with the snow. Dragon hatchlings. Baby dragons. Minho knew about the dragons of Viralis. Everyone in the galaxy knew about them. The Draka, they called themselves. They were an ancient and powerful species. They had ruled this planet for thousands of years. They had built cities of ice and stone. They had created art and music. They had even developed space travel before humans did. But the Draka had strange customs, very strange customs. Minho knelt down beside the 2 small creatures. They were tiny, no bigger than house cats. Their scales were pure white, like fresh snow. Their eyes were closed. They were not moving. He pulled off his glove and carefully touched one of them. It was cold, so very cold. But wait, he felt something. A heartbeat, weak and slow, but there. These hatchlings were still alive. Barely. Minho knew what had happened here. He had read about it in his research files. The Draka believed that albino dragons were cursed. White scales meant bad luck. When albino hatchlings were born, the Draka would take them far from their cities and leave them in the snow to die. They called it returning them to the ice. It was tradition. It was their way. But Minho was human. Humans did not have this tradition. Humans believed in saving lives, not throwing them away because of the color of their skin or scales. His hands shook as he opened his equipment pack. He pulled out the thermal blanket he kept for emergencies. It was silver and thin, but it could hold in body heat. Carefully, very carefully, he wrapped both hatchlings together in the blanket. They were so light, so fragile. "Hang on, little ones," Minho whispered. "Just hang on." He knew what he was doing was dangerous. The research station had strict rules. Rule number 1, do not interfere with native customs. Rule number 2, do not take alien creatures without permission. Rule number 3, do not start diplomatic problems. Minho was about to break all 3 rules, but he did not care. He could not leave these babies to die. He would not. He tucked the wrapped hatchlings inside his thermal suit, against his chest. His own body heat would help keep them warm. They felt like ice against his skin, even through his shirt. He zipped up his suit and started walking back to the station. The walk took forever. Every step was difficult. The wind pushed against him. The snow made it hard to see. His legs were tired, but Minho kept going. He had to. 2 small lives depended on him. Inside his suit, he could feel the hatchlings. They were so still. Were they still breathing? He could not check while walking. He just had to trust and keep moving. Finally, after what felt like days but was only 2 hours, Minho saw the lights of the research station. The small building looked beautiful in the white storm. Safety, warmth, a chance. He stumbled through the entrance. The door sealed behind him with a hiss. The warm air hit his face like a blessing. His helmet display stopped flashing cold warnings. Minho ran to his quarters. His rooms were small, just a bedroom, a bathroom, and a lab area. But right now, they were perfect. He gently unzipped his suit and pulled out the thermal blanket. The hatchlings were still wrapped inside, still not moving. "Come on, come on," Minho said. His hands were shaking again, not from cold this time, from fear. He laid the blanket on his work table and carefully unwrapped the babies. They looked like little sculptures made of ice and bone, beautiful and terrible at the same time. Their scales caught the light and sparkled. Their small wings were folded against their bodies. Their tiny claws were curled up tight. Minho checked for heartbeats again. Yes, still there, both of them. But so weak. He needed to warm them up, but not too fast. Warming frozen creatures too quickly could kill them. He had learned this in school. Slow and steady was the way. Minho grabbed every heating lamp he had in his lab. He set them up around the table, creating a warm zone. Not hot, just warm. He set the temperature controls carefully. He also filled a bowl with warm water and placed it nearby. The air needed humidity. Dragon skin could crack if it got too dry. Then he did something he probably should not have done. He connected his medical scanner to the hatchlings. The device beeped and hummed. It was made for scanning humans, not dragons. But biology was biology. Hearts, lungs, blood, these things worked the same in most species. The scanner's screen showed 2 small bodies, 2 heartbeats, 2 sets of lungs trying to breathe. Their body temperatures were dangerously low. Their blood was moving too slowly. But they were fighting. They wanted to live. "That's right," Minho said softly. "You fight. You keep fighting. I'll help you. I promise." He pulled up a chair and sat down. He was not going anywhere. He would watch over these babies all night if he had to. All week, however long it took. On the wall, his computer screen suddenly flickered to life. A female voice spoke from the speakers. "Minho, I'm detecting unauthorized biological samples in your quarters. Please explain." It was Hana, the station's artificial intelligence. She monitored everything. Of course, she knew what he had done. Minho looked at the 2 tiny dragons under the warm lights. They looked so peaceful now, so innocent. They had done nothing wrong. They were just born with the wrong color scales. "I found them in the snow, Hana," he said. "They were dying. I couldn't just leave them there." There was a pause. Then Hana spoke again. Her voice was careful. "The Draka have specific customs regarding albino hatchlings. You are aware of this?" "Yes," Minho said. "I'm aware." "You understand this action may cause diplomatic complications?" "Yes." Another pause. Longer this time. "Understood," Hana finally said. "I will note in my log that the specimens were collected for research purposes. How can I assist you in keeping them alive?" Minho smiled. Even artificial intelligence could understand compassion, it seemed. "Thank you, Hana. Let's get to work." The long night began. 3 days had passed since Minho brought the hatchlings to his quarters. 3 long, difficult days filled with worry and hope and exhaustion. The first night had been the hardest. Minho had stayed awake for 26 hours straight, watching the babies under the warming lights. Every few minutes, he would check their heartbeats. Every hour, he would adjust the temperature. He was terrified of making a mistake. One wrong move, and they would die. But slowly, very slowly, the hatchlings had started to warm up. Their body temperatures rose degree by degree. Their heartbeats became stronger. Their breathing became steadier. By the morning of the 2nd day, Minho had seen something wonderful. One of the hatchlings had opened its eyes. They were blue, the most beautiful blue Minho had ever seen, like ice crystals catching sunlight. The little dragon had looked at him with those blue eyes, and Minho had known in that moment that everything would be okay. Now, on day 3, both hatchlings were awake. They were still weak, but they were alive. They were going to survive. Minho sat at his work table, watching them. He had built them a proper nest using spare blankets and heating pads. The nest sat inside a large glass container that had once held lab equipment. It was not perfect, but it worked. The glass walls kept the warm air inside. The heating pads kept the temperature steady. The soft blankets gave the babies something comfortable to rest on. He had named them. The larger one with the slightly darker white scales was Dohyun. The smaller one with the brighter blue eyes was Yuna. Minho knew he probably should not give them names. Names made things personal. Names made it harder to be scientific about this whole situation. But Minho did not care about being scientific anymore. These were not specimens. They were living beings. They deserved names. "Feeding time," Minho said. He opened the top of the glass container and reached inside. Both hatchlings lifted their heads and made small chirping sounds. They were hungry. That was good. Hunger meant their bodies were healing. But what did baby dragons eat? That was the big question. Minho had searched through every research file in the station database. There was surprisingly little information about Draka hatchlings. The Draka did not like outsiders knowing too much about their young. Minho had tried different things over the past 3 days. First, he had tried protein paste from the station's food supplies. The hatchlings had not liked it. Then he had tried vitamin-enriched water. They had drunk a little, but not much. Then yesterday, Minho had gotten desperate. He had taken one of his own meal rations, a packet of synthetic meat, and chewed it up to make it soft. He had fed small bits to the hatchlings using tweezers. They had loved it. It made sense, Minho supposed. Dragons were predators. They ate meat. Even baby dragons needed protein to grow strong. Now he opened another meal packet and began the process again. Chew the meat until it was soft. Pick up small pieces with clean tweezers. Hold the pieces in front of the hatchlings' mouths. Wait for them to open their tiny jaws. Place the food inside gently. Dohyun ate quickly, making happy chirping sounds. Yuna was more careful, taking each piece slowly and chewing it thoroughly. They had different personalities already. Minho found that fascinating. "You are eating all of his food supplies," Hana's voice said from the speakers. "At this rate, you will run out of rations in 2 weeks." Minho finished feeding the babies and closed the container. "Then I'll request a supply drop from the main station." "They will ask why you need extra food," Hana pointed out. "I'll tell them I'm doing experiments, growing samples. They don't need to know everything." Hana was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Minho, I must warn you again about the diplomatic situation. If the Draka discover what you have done, there will be consequences, serious consequences." Minho stood up and walked to the small window in his quarters. Outside, the eternal blizzard continued. Snow and wind and ice, forever and always. This was Viralis. Beautiful and deadly. "I know, Hana," he said quietly. "But what else could I do? Let them die." "That is what the Draka intended," Hana said. "It is their custom, their belief system. By interfering, you are telling them that their traditions are wrong." "Their traditions are wrong," Minho said. He was surprised by the anger in his own voice. "Killing babies because they look different is wrong. I don't care if it's tradition. I don't care if it's been their way for thousands of years. It's still wrong." Hana did not respond right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer. "I understand your feelings, but you must understand the reality of the situation. The Draka Empire is powerful. Viralis is their planet. Humans are guests here. If they decide to remove the research station, they can. If they decide to arrest you, they can. If they decide to take the hatchlings back, they can." Minho turned away from the window. He looked at the glass container where Yuna and Do-hyun were sleeping, curled up together in their nest. They looked so peaceful, so innocent. "Then I'll have to make sure they don't find out," he said. Over the next few days, Minho settled into a routine. Every morning he would wake early and check on the hatchlings. He would adjust their heating, clean their nest, and prepare their food. Then he would spend a few hours doing his regular work, the boring sample collection and testing that the station required. In the afternoons, he would return to his quarters and spend time with Yuna and Do-hyun. The babies were growing stronger every day. By the end of the first week, they could stand on their wobbly legs. By the end of the second week, they could walk around their container. They were curious about everything. They would tap on the glass walls with their small claws. They would chirp at Minho whenever he entered the room. They would play fight with each other, tumbling around in their nest. Minho started taking detailed notes. He told himself it was for scientific purposes, but really he just wanted to remember everything. He noted how Do-hyun was brave and bold, always trying to climb out of the container. He noted how Yuna was smart and careful, always watching before she acted. He noted how they communicated with each other using different chirps and clicks. He noted how their white scales started to develop a slight shimmer as they grew healthier. On day 16, something amazing happened. Minho was sitting at his desk, working on a report, when he heard a new sound, a low humming. He turned around and saw both hatchlings standing in their nest, their mouths open, making this humming sound together. They were purring, like cats, but deeper, more musical. Minho slowly stood up and walked to the container. The hatchlings saw him, and their purring got louder. Their eyes, both pairs of beautiful blue eyes, watched him with what looked like happiness. "You're happy," Minho whispered. "You're actually happy." He reached into the container. For the first time, he did not use gloves. He just reached in with his bare hand. Do-hyun immediately walked forward and pressed his small head against Minho's palm. The scales felt warm now, not cold like that first day. Warm and smooth like polished stone. Yuna came forward too, rubbing against his fingers. Both hatchlings continued their purring sound. Minho felt tears in his eyes. He did not try to stop them. This was a good moment, a pure moment. He had saved these lives. He had taken two dying creatures and given them a chance. Whatever happened next, whatever problems came from this decision, it was worth it for this moment. "I'll protect you," he promised them. "No matter what happens, I'll keep you safe." The hatchlings purred louder, as if they understood. That night, Minho could not sleep. He lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the future. What was he going to do? He could not keep Yuna and Do-hyun hidden forever. They were growing fast. Soon they would be too big for the glass container. Soon they would need more space, more food, more everything. And what happened when they learned to fly? Dragons could fly. That was what made them dragons. Could he really keep them locked in his small quarters for their entire lives? No, that would not be fair. That would be like saving them from one prison just to put them in another. But if he let them outside, someone would see them. The Draka had settlements on Viralis. They had patrols. They had scouts. White dragons would stand out against the gray rocks and dark ice of the inhabited areas. They would be spotted immediately. And then what? Would the Draka take them back? Would they finish what they started in that blizzard? Minho's hands curled into fists. No, he would not let that happen. He would find a way. He had to. From across the room, he heard gentle purring sounds. Yuna and Do-hyun were sleeping, content and safe. Minho closed his eyes. Tomorrow he would figure out the answers. Tomorrow he would make a plan. Tonight, he would just be grateful that they were alive. The snow continued to fall outside, endless and white. 2 months had passed, 2 months of secret feeding, careful hiding and constant worry. But they had been 2 good months, maybe the best months of Minho's life. Yuna and Do-yun were no longer tiny hatchlings. They had grown to the size of large dogs. Their wings had developed properly, strong and graceful. Their scales shimmered like diamonds in the light. Their blue eyes were bright and intelligent. They were beautiful creatures, and Minho loved them like they were his own children. But there was a problem. A big problem. They had outgrown his quarters. They needed space to move, to practice flying, to be real dragons. Keeping them in the glass container had become impossible. Keeping them in his small rooms had become cruel, so Minho had made a decision, a risky decision. He had started taking Yuna and Do-yun to the biodome. The research station had a biodome on its western side. It was a large bubble of reinforced glass filled with plants and soil brought from Earth. The original plan had been to test if Earth crops could grow in viralis conditions. The experiment had failed. Nothing grew well in the artificial light and recycled air. Now the biodome sat mostly empty, used only for storage. Perfect for 2 young dragons who needed to stretch their wings. Every night, after the other researchers had gone to sleep, Minho would sneak Yuna and Do-hyun to the biodome. He had rigged the door locks so Hana would not report his visits. Inside the large space, the dragons could run and jump and practice flying. Minho would watch them, taking notes, recording videos, documenting everything, and what he discovered amazed him. Yuna and Do-hyun were incredibly intelligent, not just animal smart, really intelligent. They understood complex commands. They could solve problems. They could even communicate basic ideas using different sounds and gestures. When Minho held up one finger, they knew it meant, wait. When he held up 2 fingers, they knew it meant, come here. They had learned these signals in just days. More than that, they showed emotions. Real emotions. They played with each other and with Minho. They showed excitement when he arrived. They showed concern when one of them got hurt during play. Once, Do-hyun had scratched his wing on a broken plant container. Yuna had immediately stopped playing and had gone to her brother, making soft, worried chirps and gently touching the injury with her nose. That was empathy. That was caring. That was proof that these creatures were not cursed or broken or wrong. They were just different, and different was not bad. Tonight, Minho sat on an old storage crate, watching the dragons practice flying. They were getting good at it. Do-yun could now fly in circles around the whole biodome. Yuna preferred to hover in one place, her wings beating in a steady rhythm. Both of them looked so happy, so free. Minho's computer pad buzzed. He looked down at the screen. It was his daily log. He had been recording everything about the dragons, their growth, their behavior, their abilities. He had hundreds of pages of notes now, thousands of photos and videos. This was not just personal anymore. This was science. This was proof. Proof that the Draka were wrong about albino dragons. Proof that these creatures deserved to live. But what could he do with this proof? He could not publish it. The moment he did, the Draka would find out. They would come for Yuna and Do-hyun. They would take them away. Unless he could show the galaxy first. Unless he could make the whole universe see what he had seen. Then maybe, just maybe, there would be too much pressure on the Draka to harm 2 innocent dragons that everyone knew about. It was a dangerous idea, but Minho was starting to think it might be the only idea. He was still thinking about this when Hana's voice suddenly filled the biodome. Minho, emergency. You need to return to the main building immediately. We have visitors. Minho jumped to his feet. Visitors? What kind of visitors? Draka, Hana said. Her voice sounded worried, which was strange because she was an AI. An official transport ship just landed. They are requesting to speak with the station director. But Minho, they are asking about you specifically. Minho's blood turned cold. No, Not now. Not yet. He was not ready. How did they find out? He asked. Unknown, Hana replied. But you need to hide Yuna and Do-hyun. Now. Minho looked at the two dragons. They had stopped flying and were watching him, sensing his fear. Their blue eyes were wide and alert. Come, Minho said, making the hand signal. Both dragons immediately landed near him. We need to go back to the room. Quietly. Quickly. He led them through the dark corridors of the station. His heart was pounding. His mind was racing. Someone had talked. Someone had seen something. Someone had reported him. When they reached his quarters, Minho sealed the door and turned on extra sound dampening. Stay quiet, he told the dragons. No chirping, no purring, nothing. Understand? Yuna and Do-hyun both made small clicking sounds. Yes. They understood. Minho took a deep breath and left his quarters. He walked to the station's main meeting room. His legs felt heavy, his hands were shaking. This was it. Everything was about to change. The meeting room was small and plain. There was a table, some chairs, and a view screen on the wall. Standing in the room were three figures. They were Draka. Minho had seen Draka before, but always from a distance. Up close, they were impressive. They stood upright on two legs like humans, but they were much taller, maybe 7 feet tall. Their bodies were covered in scales that ranged from deep green to dark blue. They had wings folded against their backs. Their faces were long and sharp, with intelligent eyes and rows of teeth. Their claws clicked on the floor as they moved. The one in the center wore armor marked with military symbols. He was clearly the leader. His scales were almost black, a sign of age and status among the Draka. I am High Commander Tae-yang, the dragon said. His voice was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. But he spoke human language perfectly. You are the xenobiologist Minho? Yes, Minho said. His voice came out smaller than he wanted. We have received reports, Tae-yang continued, that you have been harboring 2 albino hatchlings. Hatchlings that were properly returned to the ice, as is our custom. Is this true? Minho's mind raced. Should he lie? Should he deny everything? But what was the point? They clearly knew. Lying would only make things worse. Yes, he said. It's true. I found them dying in a blizzard. I saved their lives. Tae-yang's eyes narrowed. You interfered with a sacred tradition. You violated the natural order. Those hatchlings were born cursed. They should have died. They're not cursed, Minho said. The words came out before he could stop them. They're healthy. They're intelligent. They're just different. You know nothing of our ways, human, one of the other Draka said. She was smaller than Tae-yang, with bright green scales. Albinos bring misfortune. This has been known for generations. That's superstition, Minho said. He knew he should be more careful with his words. But anger was replacing his fear. I've been studying them for 2 months. I have data, proof. They're as smart as any dragon, maybe smarter. Tae-yang stepped forward. His presence filled the room. Where are they? Minho stood his ground. Safe. Bring them to me, Tae-yang ordered. Now, they must be returned to the ice to complete the ritual. You have delayed the natural cycle long enough. No, Minho said. The word hung in the air. All 3 Draka stared at him. No one said no to a high commander. No one refused a direct order. You dare refuse me? Tae-yang's voice was dangerously quiet. I won't let you kill them, Minho said. His whole body was shaking now, but he kept talking. They're living beings. They have feelings. They have thoughts. They deserve to live just as much as any other dragon. They are abominations, the green-scaled Draka hissed. They are children, Minho shot back. Tae-yang was silent for a long moment. Then he said, You leave me no choice, human. By the authority of the Draka Empire, I am placing you under arrest. You will be charged with theft of imperial property and interference with cultural practices. The hatchlings will be confiscated and dealt with according to our law. 2 Draka guards entered the room. They moved toward Minho. This was it. This was the moment. Minho had to decide. Give up and let Yuna and Do-hyun die, or fight back? He thought of the 2 dragons in his quarters. He thought of how they purred when they were happy, how they played together, how Yuna had comforted Do-hyun when he was hurt, how they had looked at him with trust in their blue eyes. He pulled out his computer pad. His fingers moved quickly across the screen. "What are you doing?" Taeyang demanded. "Something I should have done weeks ago," Minho said. He pressed one final button. On the view screen behind Taeyang, an image appeared. It was a video of Yuna and Do-hyun flying in the biodome, beautiful and graceful and very much alive. "I'm broadcasting this," Minho said, "right now. To every research station in the sector, to every news network, to the Galactic Council. Everyone is going to see what I've seen. Everyone is going to know about Yuna and Do-hyun, and everyone is going to know what the Draka do to innocent hatchlings." Taeyang's face twisted with rage. "You have made a terrible mistake, human." "Maybe," Minho said. "But at least the truth will be out there." The guards grabbed Minho's arms. They pulled him toward the door, but Minho did not resist. He had done what he needed to do. The message was sent. The truth was spreading. Now the real fight would begin. Minho sat in the detention room. It was a small, cold space with white walls and a locked door. The Draka had put him here 3 hours ago. 3 hours of sitting alone, wondering what was happening to Yuna and Do-hyun. Wondering if his broadcast had worked. Wondering if anyone cared. The door opened. High Commander Taeyang entered, followed by the green-scaled Draka named Hyejin. Taeyang's face looked like a storm cloud, angry and dark. "You have created chaos, human," Taeyang said. His voice was tight with controlled rage. "Your little broadcast has spread across the galaxy in hours." News networks are running the story constantly. The Galactic Council has sent 3 formal inquiry requests. Even some of our own people are asking questions. Minho felt a small spark of hope in his chest. Good. Maybe they should ask questions. Hyejin stepped forward. "You do not understand what you have done. You have challenged thousands of years of tradition. You have made our people look cruel to the galaxy. You have embarrassed the Empire." "I showed the truth," Minho said simply. "If the truth embarrasses you, maybe you should change your traditions." Taeyang slammed his clawed hand on the table. The metal surface dented under the force. "You speak of things you do not understand. The albino curse is real. It has been documented throughout our history." "Show me," Minho challenged. "Show me one piece of actual evidence that albino dragons are cursed. Real evidence. Not stories, not legends, facts." Taeyang opened his mouth to respond, then closed it. He looked at Hyejin. She looked away. "That's what I thought," Minho said. "You don't have evidence. You have fear. You have old stories told by people who didn't understand genetics. But you don't have facts." Before anyone could respond, the door opened again. A young Draka entered. She was smaller than the others, with bright silver scales that marked her as young, probably not even 30 years old yet. She wore a pilot's uniform. "Hi, Commander," she said, bowing her head respectfully. "I apologize for interrupting, but there are developments you need to know about." "What developments, Sora?" Taeyang asked, irritation clear in his voice. The young pilot named Sora hesitated. "The Imperial Council has received over 10,000 messages from citizens. Most of them are asking about the albino hatchlings. Many are questioning whether the old traditions should still be followed." Hyejin hissed. "Traitors. All of them." "They are not traitors," Sora said quietly. "They are concerned citizens. And it is not just our people. The Galactic Council has scheduled an emergency session to discuss the matter. They have invited representatives from the Draka Empire to attend. They have also invited the human researcher. She looked at Minho. Taeyang's wings rustled with agitation. This is unacceptable. The Council has no authority over our internal cultural practices. Perhaps not, Sora said, but they can vote to impose sanctions on the Empire. They can restrict trade. They can limit diplomatic relations. The Council President has already suggested these possibilities in his statement. The room fell silent. Minho watched Taeyang's face carefully. The High Commander was thinking hard. Politics and tradition were colliding, and he was caught in the middle. Finally, Taeyang spoke. "Where are the hatchlings now?" "Still in the humans' quarters," Hyejin answered. "Under guard. They have been sedated to prevent problems." "Sedated?" Minho jumped to his feet. "You drugged them? They're just babies." "Sit down," Taeyang ordered. Minho did not sit. "They are alive and unharmed. We have not made any final decisions about their fate." "Their fate is to live," Minho said firmly. "That's the only acceptable option." Sora cleared her throat softly. "High Commander." "If I may speak freely?" Taeyang looked at her. "Speak." "I have seen the humans broadcast. I have watched all the videos he recorded. I have seen the hatchlings learning, playing, showing emotion. I know this contradicts our teachings, but—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "What if our ancestors were wrong? What if the albino curse was never real? What if we have been killing innocent hatchlings for generations based on fear, not fact?" Hyejin turned on her. "You dare question our most sacred traditions? You, a mere pilot? You have no authority to—" "She has the authority of truth," Minho interrupted. "And she's braver than both of you combined for saying it out loud." Taeyang looked between all of them. His expression was unreadable. Finally, he said, "Sora, leave us. I need to speak with the human alone." Sora and Hyejin both left. The door sealed behind them. Taeyang sat down heavily in the chair across from Minho. For the first time, the High Commander looked tired. Old. "You have put me in an impossible position," Taeyang said quietly. "If I follow tradition, I will look like a monster to the galaxy. If I break tradition, I will look weak to my own people. There is no good choice." "There is," Minho said. "Let Yuna and Doyun live. Let me prove that albino dragons are not cursed. Let the galaxy see that the Draka Empire can adapt, can learn, can be better than their old fears." "And if you are wrong?" Taeyang asked. "What if the hatchlings grow up to be dangerous? What if the old stories have truth in them?" "Then I will take full responsibility," Minho said. "But I'm not wrong." "I know I'm not wrong. Those two dragons have shown more kindness and intelligence in 2 months than most beings show in a lifetime." Taeyang was quiet for a long time. Then he said something that surprised Minho. "I had a brother, many years ago. He was born with white scales. I was very young, only 10 years old. I remember they took him away during a storm. I remember hearing him crying as they carried him into the blizzard." The old dragon's voice was soft, heavy with ancient pain. "I have always wondered what he would have become. If he would have been a good dragon. If he would have been my friend." Minho's throat tightened. "I'm sorry." "Do not be sorry," Taeyang said. "Be right. Be right about this, human. Because if you are wrong, if these hatchlings do turn out to be cursed, it will not just destroy your reputation, it will destroy any chance of changing our ways. No one will ever question the tradition again." "I understand," Minho said. "And I'm right. I promise you, I'm right." Over the next few days, everything moved very fast. The Galactic Council held their emergency session. Representatives from dozens of species attended. They watched Minho's videos of Yuna and Do-hyun. They listened to expert testimony from xenobiologists and geneticists. They heard arguments from both sides. The Draka traditionalists argued that the Empire's internal cultural practices were their own business. Other species had no right to interfere. It was a sovereignty issue. The reformists argued that killing intelligent beings based on superstition was not a cultural practice. It was a crime. They showed genetic evidence proving that albinism was just a pigmentation difference, nothing more. It did not affect intelligence, health, or behavior. Minho testified before the council. He stood in a huge chamber filled with alien diplomats and spoke about 2 baby dragons who just wanted to live. He showed more videos. He presented his research. He told them about how Yuna comforted Do-Yun when he was hurt, how they learned and grew and loved. The chamber was silent when he finished, silent except for the sound of his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Then something unexpected happened. A young Draka stood up in the gallery. It was Sora, the pilot. She was not supposed to be there. She was not a diplomat or a council member, but she stood anyway. "I am Draka," she said, her voice carrying through the chamber. "I was taught the old ways. I believed the old stories. But I have seen the evidence. I have seen the truth. And I can no longer support a tradition built on fear and death. The human is right. We have been wrong. For thousands of years, we have been wrong." Other young Draka in the gallery stood up. 10 of them, 20, 50. They did not speak, but their message was clear. Change was coming. Taeyang watched from the Draka delegation section. His face showed nothing, but Minho saw something in the old dragon's eyes. Relief, maybe, or hope. The council voted, not on whether to punish the Draka. That would have caused too many political problems. Instead, they voted on a resolution, a formal statement encouraging all species to base their traditions on evidence and compassion rather than superstition and fear. It was not a law. It was not binding, but it was a message the whole galaxy heard. After the vote, Minho was released. No charges were filed against him. The Draka Empire made no official statement, but they did not demand the return of Yuna and Do-Yun either. It was not a victory, not yet, but it was a start. Minho rushed back to the research station. He ran through the corridors to his quarters. The guards outside his door stepped aside without a word. Inside, Yuna and Do-Hyun were awake. The sedatives had worn off. When they saw Minho, they both made loud, happy chirping sounds and ran to him. Well, Do-Hyun ran. Yuna flew, her wings carrying her across the room in one graceful leap. Minho fell to his knees and wrapped his arms around both dragons. They purred. He cried. They were safe. For now, they were safe. "It's not over," Hana's voice said gently. "The fight is not over." "I know," Minho said, his face buried in Yuna's white scales. "But we won this battle. That's something." The 2 dragons purred louder, pressing close to their human friend. Outside, across the galaxy, the conversation was just beginning. 1 year had passed since that day in the council chambers. 1 year of change, struggle, and hope. 1 year that had transformed everything. Minho stood in a new research facility on the southern continent of Viralis. This building was much larger than his old station. It had proper laboratories, living quarters, and most importantly, a massive flight dome where dragons could stretch their wings freely. The facility had been built specifically for studying Yuna and Do-Hyun. The Galactic Council had funded it. Even the Draka Empire had contributed resources, though they had done so quietly, without much fanfare. Yuna and Do-Hyun were no longer hatchlings. They were adolescents now, each one about 12 feet long from nose to tail. Their white scales had developed intricate patterns that caught the light like snow crystals. Their wings were powerful enough to carry them for hours. Their intelligence had grown even more remarkable. They could speak now. Not human words, their mouths were not shaped right for that. But they had learned to use a translation device that Minho had built with Hana's help. The device picked up their natural dragon language, the clicks, chirps, and rumbles, and converted it into human speech. It worked the other way, too, translating human words into sounds they could understand perfectly. Right now, Minho watched through the observation window as Yuna and Do-hyun practiced aerial maneuvers in the flight dome. They moved through the air like poetry, graceful and sure. A group of young Draka pilots watched from below, taking notes. These pilots had volunteered to come here, to learn from the albino dragons they had once been taught to fear. One of those pilots was Sora. She had become something of a celebrity after her speech at the council. She had also become Yuna and Do-hyun's friend. Right now, she was flying alongside them, her own dark blue scales a sharp contrast to their white. "They are beautiful flyers," a voice said beside Minho. It was Taeyang. The old High Commander had changed much over the past year. He had become an ally, though a reluctant one at first. He now served as a liaison between the research facility and the Draka government. "They are," Minho agreed. "Do-hyun's technique is getting better every day. Yuna has always been naturally graceful." Taeyang watched the dragons in silence for a moment. Then he said, "The Imperial Council has made a decision. They want Yuna and Do-hyun to speak before the Grand Assembly next month." Minho turned to look at him. "The Grand Assembly? That's the highest governing body in the Draka Empire." "Yes," Taeyang said. "There are still many who oppose changing the traditions, many who believe we have made a mistake. The council thinks that if our people can hear from Yuna and Do-hyun directly, if they can see that albino dragons are not cursed, it will help convince the skeptics." "And if it doesn't convince them?" Minho asked. Taeyang's expression was grim. "Then the resistance to change will grow stronger. There are already protests in some cities, traditional groups who think we are abandoning our heritage. This is our chance to show them the truth." Minho looked back at the flight dome. Yuna and Do-hyun were landing now, laughing together about something only they understood. They looked so happy, so alive. The thought of them facing a hostile audience made his stomach tight with worry. "I'll talk to them," Minho said. "But the choice has to be theirs." That evening, Minho sat with Yuna and Do-hyun in their living space. It was a large room with soft flooring and temperature controls set perfectly for dragon comfort. Both dragons wore their translation devices on collars around their necks. Minho explained about the Grand Assembly, about the request for them to speak, about the risks and the importance. When he finished, there was silence. Then Yuna's voice came through the translator, feminine and clear. "They want us to prove we are not monsters." "No," Minho said quickly. "You don't have to prove anything. You exist. That's enough. But there are still people who don't understand that. People who are afraid of change." Do-hyun's deeper voice rumbled through his translator. "We should go. We should speak. If we do not, nothing will change. More hatchlings like us will die in the snow." "It might be dangerous," Minho warned. "Some people will not want to hear what you have to say." "We know," Yuna said. "But Do-hyun is right. We have to try. You saved us so we could live. Now we must use our lives to help others." Minho felt pride swell in his chest. These dragons had grown up to be everything he had believed they could be: smart, brave, compassionate. "Okay," he said. "Then we'll do this together." The Grand Assembly was held in the ancient capital city of Viralis. The building was carved from blue ice that never melted, even in summer. Inside, thousands of Draka gathered. Council members, military leaders, merchants, artists, teachers, and ordinary citizens. All had come to hear the albino dragons speak. Minho stood in the wings, watching. Yuna and Do-hyun stood on a raised platform in the center of the chamber. Spotlights made their white scales glow like stars. They looked small compared to the massive crowd around them, but they stood tall and proud. An elderly council member named Jaewon stepped forward. His scales were almost white with age, but not the pure white of albinism. "Yuna and Doyun," he said, his voice amplified through the chamber. "You stand before the grand assembly of the Draka Empire. Many here still believe in the old ways. They believe that albino dragons bring misfortune. What do you say to this?" Yuna stepped forward. Her voice came through the speakers, strong and clear. "I say that I understand their fear. Fear of the different is natural. Fear of the unknown is part of survival. But fear must not rule us. I did not choose to be born with white scales. My brother did not choose it. But we are still Draka. We still love our people. We still wish to serve our empire." A murmur went through the crowd, some supportive, some skeptical. Dohyun spoke next. "We were left to die because of an old story, a superstition. But the human Minho did not believe in that story. He believed in evidence, in kindness, in giving life a chance. He taught us that intelligence and compassion matter more than the color of scales. Is that not a lesson the Draka should embrace?" Someone in the crowd shouted, "But what of the curse? What of the disasters that albinos bring?" Yuna's translator captured her response perfectly. "What disasters? My brother and I have lived for over a year now. What misfortune have we caused? The research facility prospers. The humans and Draka work together there in peace. The only disaster I see is the waste of young lives. How many potential scientists, artists, leaders, and friends have been lost to the snow? That is the real tragedy." The chamber fell silent. The challenge hung in the air. What disasters? No one could name any. An old female dragon stood up in the gallery. Her scales were scarred from many battles. "I lost an albino daughter 40 years ago," she said, her voice cracking. "I have thought about her every day since, wondered what she would have become. I see you two standing there, so strong and well-spoken, and I know what we did was wrong. I knew it then. But I followed tradition because I was afraid to stand alone. I will not be afraid anymore." She sat down. Then another dragon stood, then another. One by one, dozens of Draka stood in support. Not all of them, maybe not even most of them, but enough. Enough to show that change was possible. Jaewon raised his hand for silence. "The council will vote on a new law, a law that prohibits the abandonment of any hatchlings, regardless of scale color. All who support this law, signify now." Claws clicked on stone as council members activated their voting devices. The count appeared on a massive screen. It was close, very close. But when the final number appeared, Minho felt tears in his eyes. The law passed. By just 12 votes, but it passed. Yuna and Dohyun would not be the last albino dragons. Others would be allowed to live now, to grow, to prove their worth. After the assembly, Minho found Taiyang in the corridor. The old High Commander looked exhausted but satisfied. "You did well," Taiyang said. "The hatchlings spoke with wisdom beyond their years." "They learned from good teachers," Minho replied. "They learned from you," Taiyang corrected. "You showed them compassion. You taught them that life has value even when others cannot see it. That is the greatest lesson of all." Minho thought about that first day in the blizzard, the choice he had made, the rules he had broken. "I just couldn't leave them there," he said. "They were babies. They needed help." "And that," Taiyang said, "is what makes humans remarkable. You refuse to abandon the helpless even when it costs you, even when it is dangerous, even when it contradicts logic and law. That stubborn, irrational compassion is your species' greatest strength." Minho smiled. "We prefer to call it humanity." That night, Minho stood outside the research facility, looking up at the stars. Yuna and Dohyun landed beside him, their wings stirring up small clouds of snow. "What happens now?" Dohyun asked through his translator. "Now we keep working," Minho said. We keep teaching. We keep proving that different is not wrong. We keep fighting for those who cannot fight for themselves. Will there be more like us? Yuna asked. More white dragons who need help? Yes, Minho said. And when they come, we will be ready. We will save them, just like we saved you. We will teach them, protect them, and help them grow strong. The two dragons moved closer, their warm scales pressing against Minho's sides. They stood together under the stars, three unlikely friends who had changed a world. Somewhere in the Empire, an albino hatchling was being born, and for the first time in thousands of years, that hatchling would not be abandoned to the ice. It would be welcomed, celebrated, given a chance to live, all because one human had refused to walk away from two dying babies in a blizzard. All because compassion had proven stronger than tradition. All because humanity, in its stubborn and beautiful way, had said no to cruelty and yes to life. The snow continued to fall, gentle and clean, covering the world in white. But it was no longer a blanket of death. Now it was just snow. Beautiful, simple, and harmless. And three friends stood together, watching it fall, knowing that tomorrow would be better than yesterday. That was enough. That was everything.